disrepair with Luke's being sick and things, and the city needs them to clean it up. Or if anybody wants to help, just throw cardboard and pallets and things and organize for them, they would really appreciate that. And
Did you say pallets?
wood pallets, or
Wood
if you
pallet,
have
yeah.
some strength, even help them just organize them in one spot in their yard, because then the city can see that they're making progress.
Oh, I see. You don't want to haul away.
Both.
Both.
Say I could use wood pallets.
Both. So
My truck's done.
you can ask me
Mine's
if
up
that's
and running
something you would like to do later. I can give you more details on how we can help bless them as they're still journeying on the recovering and things. And Gayon has been sick as well, and so there's that service opportunity, and we'll just stick with those announcements for now.
Gonna need to bring fries for everybody.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Dustin.
Bring enough for the whole class.
No, I don't have any fries.
Did you eat them all? Right in your can.
Those are fries.
In the church and the cat.
Those are not fries.
They identify as potato sticks. Not French
They're
fries.
carrots.
Blasphemy.
No, they identify as carrots.
I mean, I wouldn't want to be French either if I was a
Celery sticks.
potato.
You know, if you type in French military victories, it'll come up. Did you mean French military defeats?
Oh, Chad, aren't we in chapter 12 tonight?
We're in 2 Kings.
That's why they don't shoot off
Make
fireworks
sure your
anymore.
spurious comments relate to the text.
Oh, that's nice.
This is bigger, but
So in this chapter of Kings, who's the Burger King?
Oh.
You can't have it your way. I'm sorry.
Oh.
hey, let's
Go.
Moving on.
I know that all you reviewed last week by tuning into Facebook and realizing they covered verses 1, 2, and 3.
In depth.
Super
It was quality, not quantity.
I am more of a rabbit hole situation.
We went sideways.
So what king are we looking at now?
Jehoash.
Jehoash.
12, chapter 12.
And
Oh dear goodness.
the title of this chapter is, most of it is Jehoash repairs the temple. And so let's just read a little bit. We'll read through verses just so we get a kind of an overview, and then we'll start breaking it down verse by verse. But we'll go through 16 verses. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash became king, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Ziblah of Beersheba. Jehoash did what was right in the sight of the Lord all the days in which Jehoiada, the priest, instructed him. But the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. And Jehoash said to the priests, all the money of the dedicated gifts that are brought into the house of the Lord, each man's census money, each man's assessment money, and all the money that a man purposes in his heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it themselves, each from his constituency, and let them repair the damages of the temple, wherever any dilapidation is found. Now it was so by the 23rd year of King Jehoash that the priests had not repaired the damages of the temple. So King Jehoash called Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, why have you not repaired the damages of the temple? Now therefore do not take any more money from your constituency, but deliver it for repairing the damages of the temple. And the priests agreed that they would neither receive more money from the people nor repair the damages of the temple. Then Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bored a hole in its lid, and set it beside the altar on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord. And the priests who kept the door put there all the money brought into the house of the Lord. So it was, whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up and put it in bags, and counted the money that was found in the house of the Lord. Then they gave the money which had been apportioned into who had the oversight of the house of the Lord. And they paid it out to the carpenters and builders who worked on the house of the Lord, and to the masons and stone cutters, and for buying timber and hewn stone to repair the damage to the house of the Lord, and for all that was paid out to repair the temple. However, there were not made for the house of the Lord basins of silver, trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, any articles of gold or articles of silver from the money that brought into the house of the Lord. But they gave that to the workmen, and they repaired the house of the Lord with it. Moreover, they did not require an account from the men into whose hand they delivered the money to be paid to workmen, for they dealt faithfully. The money from the trespass offerings and the money from the sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. An interesting account. Great history. So, what's the problem here?
Money,
Is it money?
maybe.
Money's involved. What do you see as the real crux of the situation?
Greed?
Hmm?
Greed?
Greed, maybe. I don't know. It doesn't. Do you see greed there? I mean, we don't. People have a problem with greed, and there's people here. So, but it doesn't.
Is it kind of procrastination? I mean, it says in his 23rd year, so that means he's already been king for 23 years, and he's barely not even getting around to repairing the temple, which was destroyed before he even became king.
And he did give the job. He did hand out the job. He's the one who first saw. The king saw the need and called for the repair. So the basic problem, without defining its source or, who's, yeah.
I think like he saw the need for the repair, but then he didn't check back on it for 23 years, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
20. So was he not going to the temple himself?
Yeah. Well, we don't know.
Right? But I mean, if you see the repairs being done originally, and then you don't look back again and check on it, that's not managing very well.
So you figure whose primary responsibility was
The high priest.
the high priest and the Levites. They're given charge to the temple. That's their whole realm. They're given the responsibility. They have the calling of God. As scripture you read, Leviticus, and other, even in Deuteronomy and Numbers, and talks about the temple worship and the beginning of the temple and the building of the temple and God's glory coming and all the history. I mean, the temple is integrally wrapped up in the whole history of Israel. It's the focal point of their entire national life. And so it's a pretty sad state of affairs. So, we have the first Joash did what was right in the sight of the Lord all the days in which Joiada the priest instructed him. And so you have a godly king and a godly priest, and something's wrong. Neither the priest nor the king have done anything so far, but who initiates from the get-go?
It's supposed to be the king.
King.
But can we really blame the king though at that time? Because at the time he took his reign, he was only 7 years old.
Yeah. But
So he's a
stop
child.
and look at this. A 7-year-old who has the tutoring
Of the high priest.
of a high priest who is also godly and taught him. Jehoash grew up in the temple from age 7. He became king at 7. His whole life he's been in the temple. You see his that could be a clue as to why he's taking initiative. some time to get up to speed. Being king, you know, when you're 7, 8, 9 years old, you really can't blame a kid that age, you know, third grader.
Hey Steve,
For-
your alarm's going on.
For not being more proactive in such a matter of state as this.
Just blame it on him being a teenager.
Could it be?
But at this point, it says that he's,
Could this be something like, it's been that way for so long, he didn't necessarily have like a fire to change it, like he's complacent with the way it was?
Yeah.
Is that where we're getting at?
Yeah, and you know, we don't know, but you know, you can speculate because just humanness. You know, he served as king for 40 years, but somewhere along in the process of all the things that he had to do, you know, and this is a hard time for Israel with invasion of foreign kings and you know, look at what our leaders face today. You know what I'm saying? When you want to do the right thing, how's it go?
The litigation and.
Yeah, all the opposition and
The red tape.
naysayers and even if people don't, you just go, well, I kinda know where people are at, you know, you can sit and think for how long and say, is this the battlefield I wanna die on, are we ready for this, are people gonna respond to this, and you could say, well, just do the right thing. Yeah, it's easy to say, because you're in that situation. So we can speculate, but it's not a huge leap in the dark because we're human beings. And we know. So let's make some observations, some takeaways. The people. You know, when they put the box out there, for whatever reason, we'll talk about that later, when the people got motivated, what came in?
Money.
Lots of money. All the money they needed. Their economy at that time was way better than ours. Okay? Well, let's say the building here burned down sometime this week.
So if
And-
you're being up to-
Pastor Brian and the deacons take a box and bore a hole in it. Put it out there. So on Sunday, when we come to the burned out building, we can drop money in. Okay, you look at this structure, maybe we need $500,000 to rebuild it. Does $500,000 go in there?
Who knows?
Probably not. I think we could probably empty all our bank accounts
Not
and not get $500,000. You know what I'm
Where's your
saying?
aid, Kelly?
$500,000, that's a lot of money.
Unless some of you are holding out on us.
The Lord will provide.
Yeah, the
This is
Lord will
true.
provide, but not from our bank account.
Okay, yeah, miracle ways.
Okay,
Make a
their
Wish
economy
Foundation.
was good, these people have money. Like you look here, he said they bored a hole in it and set it beside the altar on the right side as one comes into the house of the Lord, and the priest who kept the door put there all the money brought into the house of the Lord. So it was whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and high priest came up and put it in bags and counted the money that was found in the house of the Lord. And they did the work. They had everything they needed. You contrast that, yeah.
So now, what was there incentives? Well, I mean, it sounds like now there's an incentive for the work to be done with the money that's being collected, whereas before, say in the other times they did the temple, were they not being paid, or were they doing it out of the graciousness of their own?
And you know, it doesn't really tell us the problem. It's again where we can maybe use a little sanctified imagination.
Yeah.
Because Jehoiada and the Levites, they were given the job and they're collecting money, and they did collect some money, but finally the king said, you know, stop collecting the money. Just stop.
Because they were lining their pockets.
Well, it doesn't say that.
Okay, so
It doesn't say that, but there wasn't any enthusiasm. And the people weren't bringing the money. Some people bringing some money, but, you know, it's like, here's without the enthusiasm, you know, the Levites and the chief priests, you know, here's the money comes in, it's like, it's not really enough. So then they don't really do anything because the people aren't excited, and they don't get excited. If the people got excited and said, yeah, let's do it, yeah, let's bring some more money, let's bring, you know, but none of that was happening. It was just like, eh. And so, you know, it just like fizzles. And, and all the money that a man purposes in the heart to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take it themselves, each from his consent, and let them repair the damage. And it's like, now it was by the 23rd year King Joash that the priest had not repaired the damage of the temple. And so the king steps in. Why have you not repaired the damages? Now therefore do not take more money from your constituency. You know, so it's just not, it's not happening. Now you say, it's been a long time, and what are the people doing? Where are they worshiping? Many of them. They're worshiping Baal in the high places. So you see here, there's a competition between God, the true God, who's manifested his glory in the temple, and the people now that have turned to pagan heathen ways. And so there's a competition going on here. In the midst of this competition, the high priest and the Levites are charged with repairing the temple. Now it's again, use our sanctified imagination, there's a godly king who's grown up in the temple, and he wants to repair it, he wants to restore it to its glory, he wants to honor God, he wants to restore the worship of the temple. He didn't take down the high places. Well, that's where the people are at.
Isn't there a position, it sounds like today,
It does.
people want you to come to their level, while you, the blessing comes from God. You cannot produce a blessing.
Yeah.
It comes from there, from God.
But he knows that, but you know, the temple is God's idea. And so at least Joash, he said, well, let's make things right.
Let's clean the place up a bit.
So maybe he thinks, he knows where the people are at, and he goes, you know, you can't just change everything immediately. I said, I could go tear down the high places. And you can see when you change things, like right now in our country, in sweet little Twin Falls, you see the protesters out at the corner?
What
Yeah,
corner?
well, they're there all day. Holding signs, you know, against tyranny and, you know, on the corner of Blue Lakes and Addison. I go, what? You know? So, you know, you can, it's a response to graft and corruption being tackled. And closing departments and laying people off that aren't doing anything, stuff like that. And we're not gonna debate the politics. But the point is there's change. It involves money and people's lifestyle and people's jobs and all that.
Comfortability.
And it creates, so here's the same thing. Jehoash says, well, maybe he's thinking, see if this could be the possibility. If we restore the temple, and people see we're serious about honoring God and worshiping God in this amazing temple with the visible presence of God, then they're not going to want to go to the high places anymore. Then once people return to the temple, maybe then we can tackle these high places. Maybe. Now I'm saying that because Jehoash, it says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He wants to please God. He knows that stuff is terrible stuff. Okay? So finally, when the people didn't respond, and you could see the national life, you know, it's like they have the same dichotomy between good and evil and different sides and all that, like we do in our world today. And people people were lackluster, and they say, oh yeah, you want to bring us our money, so what have you guys been doing? You priests and Levites and stuff, you've been here for years, as long as, you know, great grandpas talked about you guys. And go all the way back in our history, you know, wandered around the desert, all that. You're not doing anything. You want to bring us all our money, and you're not doing anything.
So is this the biblical kind of principle of the same thing as like the stimulus check, right? Is to incentivize it for growth in the economy.
So anyway, there's the box with the hole. Why would that stimulate any more response?
It's made of oak. I don't know.
Well, they're saying, okay, something's new, something's different, because I'm not giving it to the Levites.
They're giving it to the people that are actually going to be doing the work.
And they were sure, maybe, they didn't know, because the first people started going putting money in the box. Maybe you didn't know what was going to, the Levites couldn't come at night. But anyway, something different, and the people brought money. And as soon as the box was full, we came and bagged it up, and took it, and what did they do with the money? Counted it, take it immediately. Okay, carpenters, stonemasons.
They paid the workers that rebuilt the
It
temple.
went straight to the workers, and it funded them because they had to go buy lumber, they had to go buy, all the materials. They read all the materials.
Timber and huge stone.
Yeah, all the different tradesmen that were involved. And you know what? At least you could say the king and the workers made this happen. Okay, so that's just something for the tradesmen, the stonemasons, the
People
cement
with their hands.
workers,
The blue collar workers.
the blue collar people. They say, right, great. I've been sitting on my rear for so long. Now we got this really cool project to work on. Let's see what we can do, and we got the money to buy the materials, and they get the job done. They go for it. I think that's exciting. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is grassroots.
So in Second Kings it talks about he put the chest by the altar, but in Second Chronicles it goes a little deeper in
Yeah.
24 that they put it out by the gates.
Yeah.
And then they made proclamations of this is what Moses commanded us.
Yeah.
And went out and told them to do it. So there's something about advertisement here too,
Yeah.
right? And they stated it until they went out proclaiming it until it was
Yeah, so it's like the people that were giving knew what they were giving to and for and what the plan was, and there's kind of like, hey, this is what we want to do, and we're helping raise money for this
Right.
project.
And it's pretty hard to, get your greasy fingers in a box that's sitting right out in the open. And, when the high priest and when, what was the other guy besides the high priest who also came and counted the money?
This is the king's.
King's advisor, was it? Or something else? Oh, the royal secretary. That sounds
So
important.
you also too, you got some accountability. You got from you got the religious department and the executive branch and that's like the Supreme Court.
It's kind of
And
interesting how
there's
that's
balance of power to it. They're taking it out together so that okay,
kind of like how you do it when you have 2 or 3 people that count it and verify and just make
Yeah.
sure that nobody, it's accountability.
So here, it said once they started dispersing the mites, they didn't even have to keep tabs or anything. And that really says something because
they knew
so
how
what
much.
we find out's been happening with the Treasury in the United States, with the money that goes into the coffers.
We have 22 middlemen.
That everybody's been,
Only 22?
the bureaucracy's been dipping into the till with billions and billions and billions of dollars all over the place. And this wasn't happening. It wasn't happening.
Can't walk any faster.
You can if you start running.
So, so Joyd, at least, he had a plan of work. And by the way, you say, it may sound strange, but, in many evangelical churches today, if you go there, we pass the offering plate. How many churches have you seen that? church, they had a box in the back and people were putting their money in the box. That wasn't a hole, but it was a slot.
Yeah.
Had a little lock on it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And, every week the treasurer would check it. And, at this time, I had a fellow pastor that was down in Gooding, and he was really discouraged with his church. He had 2 other jobs. He was driving a trash truck in Gooding, and he was working something else as he was pastoring. And, he shared with me, he says, yeah, last week I opened the cash box and it was $7.14. And that's why he was driving the trash truck. That's rough.
Yeah.
You know? So I heard about that, I go, and giving wasn't super high up in Bellevue, and so I said, well, maybe we start passing the offering plate because people just don't understand the need. And I do this little mini devotional, always something from scripture or from missionary life or something like that has something to do with giving or the need or whatever. And you know what happened over the next 2 years?
Same thing.
Giving didn't change. It was the same. And we went back to putting the money in the box. And, it was adequate, but my conclusion was it doesn't mean that, in our life here in America today, that, if God's people have it on their heart to support God's work, it doesn't matter whether you pass the offer plate or put a box.
It's the heart.
And now we have other options like, you can
Convenience.
online, you can give online or whatever, through PayPal or.
Well, then there's other churches that have done kind of the same thing with the whole box idea, right? Their whole idea of this box was they put it out in front, and they just asked everybody. And this was one of those mega churches, but they just said, just give $1. Just give $1, and within within a month, and they do like 2 or 3 services a week, and they raise like $10,000, right? Just that $1
Yeah.
per person, right? $1 a week per person, or whatever, right? And when you realize like how little like the majority of the world really lives off of, right? Like when we think $50 supplies a kid for water for a year in some of these countries, right?
Yeah.
Like I think what is it, like 60% of the world lives on less than $3 a day, right? And then when we really think of the abundance that we have here in the United States, and that if a lot of those persecuted churches and these our brothers and sisters in these hard hit countries, they're praying for our eyes to be open to see that like we are so well off here.
Yeah.
To just be willing to help with the Lord's work, right? And it's just so crazy because we don't see ourselves as well off or whatever because it's that whole battle of comparison. But really, like in the grand scheme of the rest of the world,
Yeah.
we are so wealthy. Like 65% of the world doesn't even have a flushing toilet.
Yeah.
And so it's really crazy where our priorities are.
And so here, people brought their money, and I would have said nobody needed to really hold the workmen or the other middle people accountable because they were faithful, because they were faithful. And so you didn't have any Doge committee, You didn't have to have that. They didn't have that.
They were faithful.
Yeah. And the money came in. And the people's hearts were in the right place with that because they knew what they were given to, and something changed, and maybe it's God that changed people's hearts. But the money that came in, and as it's coming in, it's going into the workman's hand, and they're buying the stuff, and they're doing the work, and people see that, and they bring more, and it's like, okay, we got enough, and it's awesome to see that. And
Do you think at that point the people that were giving all of a sudden just started to actually decide to trust whom they were giving their money to?
Yeah.
Because they started to see work actually being
Yeah.
done.
Right.
So it was like, oh, I guess I
Adequate
can.
work for adequate pay.
Well, it's even that, like, right? Because how often, I've had a few people in my life that they question where where their money's going when they give, right, and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Whether that's right or wrong, but
Yeah.
I guess it's a little bit different when you start seeing that money be used
Oh yeah.
the way in which you were hoping for, or the way in which you were asking for.
And word gets around fast. You don't have to have internet to find out. You know, back then, stuff spread by fast and people would find out, you know. Now, at the same time, if the workers were all running around in new chariots and stuff, and work wasn't getting done,
Yeah.
you know, that would have created a price.
Quite a stink.
It was probably working double because the money was coming in and then the money going out was, they were like finding ways to save money. The workers were like, hey, we can do this. And they were doing it, trying to gift, you know, they weren't taking their extravagant wages and doing all that stuff. So the money went a lot further for both ways.
Yes,
You guys have seen my big player piano, those of you who come in my apartment. When I first got him, he'd been half destroyed by rats or mice or something with the storage shed he was in. And I had a piano tuner, cleaner, repair and player, offer to do it all for $500. It was a $2,300 job. Well, I took out a sign and said, you know, 500 people gave $1, our goal would be met. And you would be amazed at how many people came up and went, oh, I can get more than $1 here, 5, 10. I mean, the less you ask, the more you get. It's a true story. I ended up with the whole pretty much the whole $2,400.
well, let's, you know, you mentioned the
Andrew.
passage from Second Chronicles. Let's look at that real quick, because that's kind of like a parallel passage that does give some more information. Second Chronicles 24, starting in verse 5. It says, when he gathered the priests and the Levites and said to them, go out to the cities of Judah and gather from Israel money to repair the house of your God from year to year and see that you do it quickly. However, the Levites did not do it quickly. And so the king called Joiada the chief priest and said to him, why have you not required the Levites to bring in from Judah and from Jerusalem the collection according to the commandment of Moses, the servant of the Lord, and of the assembly of Israel for the tabernacle of witness? For the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman had broken into the house of God and had also presented all the dedicated things of the house of the Lord to the Baals. So the implements of worship in the temple had been robbed and given for the worship of Baal. You see the depth of this competition? And then at the king's command, they made a chest, and then it goes, it tells more. But thus they did, and down in verse 11, thus they did day by day and gathered money in abundance. So then at the end it says, and when they had finished, they brought the rest of the money before the king and Joiada, and they made private articles for the house of the Lord. They made the articles for serving and offering spoons and vessels of gold and silver. And they offered burnt offerings in the house of the Lord continually all the days of Joiada. So the temple worship is restored, and even the articles that had been stolen are replaced now. Made of gold and silver, yes.
Where did you read they're being replaced? It says in 13 they're not made.
Well, because the basic repairs needed to be done first. But when they finished there, but when they, down in verse 14, when they had finished, they brought the rest of the money. So you see, there's money, they finished, and there's money left over. So it says, they made from the articles for the house of the Lord, articles for serving and offering, spoons and vessels of gold and silver. And
So,
they're in.
and then the money probably got stretched again because the workers were doing the best job they could.
Yeah.
So that, you know, they were like, hey, this is for the Lord. Do the best job you can. So that probably got stretched even more.
And you know, you can see that it says there in Kings it was dilapidated, you know. In other words, it's really run down. And you go, that takes some time and some serious neglect. You know, particularly a lot of this is made out of pretty durable materials. This is not a stick-built temple, you know what I'm saying? You know, where you get old sheetrock real easy. And then your roof has to You know what I'm saying? It's not that kind of building. And so this has been a long time, and it's been abused, it's been neglected. And so it took a major project to really get it back in shape. And you know, we say a lot, you know, that the building we meet in is not like the temple, because our bodies are the temple of the Holy Ghost, you know, the Holy Spirit. Holy Ghost. And so so it doesn't equate. The church buildings today don't equate with the temple in that sense. But
At least,
you also, in that sense too, the things that the Lord blesses us with to use for His service. You know, it's a place where we as the temple, our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. But these buildings that we meet in are dedicated for the Lord's use, right? They permit us to gather. Okay, and we have 150 people there. You know, some people say, well, you know, we ever have buildings, they just meet people thousands. Well, okay, let's meet in your house first. Let's put 150 people in your house, and then you get to clean it every week. Okay, and it gets rough pretty quick. You know, unless you're going to artificially restrict your size so that you can only have as many people as fit in the house. So you say it takes money, and we need to maintain what God has given us to use for His work. Right? And when we first went to Bellevue, up in the Woodward Valley, and people said, you know, we're going to reach the people in the valley. Well, you know, there's some high-end people, right? There's people that are used to wealth and they have expectations. When we first went into the nursery, and in the corner of the nursery there was mushrooms growing on the carpet. Would you put your kid in there?
Thanks, bye.
It was bad, but they'd been in that building. It was really, the whole building was really bad. In fact, the upstairs had kind of been condemned, so we had it blocked off. We broke it, we were afraid that the floor would cave in. And,
you wanted to be underneath it?
yeah, well, long story. We spent $100,000 remodeling it. Very, very nice. But here's people, and again, it was a blue collar church, but there was money. There
You
was
say 300,000?
100.
That's a,
and there was money in the
that's a lot of money.
That's
And, but the people had been in that building so long, it was like homey to them, and they didn't see.
Blind eye.
They didn't say, we came in and we're fresh eyes, right? And they didn't see what we saw. And we said, this is embarrassing. You know, we who bear God's name, we look like paupers. We look like gross. We look like hicks, you know. And why would, you know, we wonder, well, why would people visit? And then they leave. Well, they have small children. And you know, we just get used to things, and we live our own lives. And there's people, and it's like they're fixing their own houses, they're improving their own lives, and they had to be called to say that, you know, this is, you know, you live in your nice houses because God's been gracious and provided you for that. But look at what you're doing where He's chosen to manifest His presence, where we go to worship God and to sacrifice all those offerings, you know, the sin offerings, the Thanksgiving offering, you know, you can read back the whole system of worship, where all that's supposed to happen, and look at the places falling down. And each time it's down, now we'll just go to the high places. You know, where Baal's not broke. Well, then application, when we have to say, aren't we glad we are not worshiping anything false? There's no Baal today. things that are competing with the worship of God in our lives.
Internet.
Busy.
Yeah. Busyness and the goals and pursuits. And
People
And what is-
flocking to the bars. Worldly life, worldly pursuits.
what is God calling us to? What are the high places we need to tear down? And what is the work of the Lord that's suffering that needs to be built up?
What are the little G gods that are in your life that you're worshiping?
SpaceX space station.
You know, so I got an interesting question then. So, you know, those are the places of worship and rebuilding that, right? And let's spin that now. I mean, and I understand that, you know, we can go to further the church and stuff like that, but the churches that have apparel stores and bookstores and coffee shops on the inside, right? You know, but it's like you're having a market inside your own building. You know? It's just something I was kind of curious about. You know, what?
We are this weekend, come.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, like, you know, in the instance, you know, like, are we just coming for convenience sake, where it has a state of the art nursery and it has the best worship music and it's got the Hebrews coffee in there and it's like you check your church box off.
The church that has a 7-Eleven in it, it's great.
You know, but
People used to do that all the time for the better agape dinners. They go, oh, I got this one.
Well, and the part of the thing is that every church needs to struggle with, if they understand their biblical calling. And you can have a building you meet in, but really what you need to do, if you want to understand the values and the mission of the church, is ask for a copy of the budget. And, you know, I've candidated at churches around the country and I ask, let me see your budget. Because you tell me what you value, I'll find out what you value by looking at your budget.
Are they willing to do that?
church job.
Well, if you don't go, if they don't give you your budget, you're not gonna go there to pastor, right? So you look at the budget and you open it up and building budget's $200,000 a year.
That kind of tells
Okay.
you kind of
Education budgets and other administrative costs is $100,000 a year. Salaries, $100,000 a year.
if you were a different kind of pastor, you could just ask for your wages.
And, you know, and you look at that, then you look at the missions budget is $10,000.
Community based.
And community benevolence is $3,000. And you say, this is not what you were telling me, what your values are. Because where you spend your money shows where your values are.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah. And so, there's one church I love, it was in Beaverton, Oregon, which is a real ritzy community, Village Baptist Church. 50% of their budgets went to missions.
Nice.
No matter what people said, they programs they want to do, whatever, they said, well, we gotta sit there and budget because, you know, 50%, half of every money, every funds of anything coming to the church goes to missions. Now, I haven't seen a church since then that could say that they were committed and actually did give 50% of all their money to missions. But you see, the thing is, every week, every month, whenever somebody wanted, well, let's do this program, let's do this. Well, is there money to do that? Because we're not cutting into missions. Because that was their heartfelt commitment was to do that. See what I'm saying? You really have to think that through. Every decision about what you do that involves money has to be filtered through. Does this fit with our commitment? Because if it's going to take money away from missions, then we're not doing it. That means that if you're going to do a new program that's going to cost $1,000, what do you have to do? Either that or you raise $2,000. $1,000 goes to missions, $1,000 goes to program. Yeah. And then individually, then we need to be called to that. And so before we buy a new house, we say, well, is that gonna mean I'm gonna cut my tithe? So I can afford the bigger thing. Hard decisions.
You know, but at the same time though, I think there's a lot to go with that too, because I think we can also, he wants us to give from a willing heart, a giving heart, right? And I think we can burden ourselves so much with, you know, oh, I get a bonus and I get per diem, or, you know, there's this unexpected bill, or what if I already give my tithe, but then an opportunity to gift somebody something comes up, right? How we can just get so overwhelmed and overstimulated, you know, and I think simplicity and trying to just, it's the willingness of your heart, right? Like, and what is your security, because that's what mammon is, right? Mammon is basically, it is trying to promise the only things that God can give, and it gives a false sense of security. And mammon attaches itself to wealth and riches, right? So, is your security in your 401k? Is your security in your paycheck, right? Is money a little g God in your life, right? And it's easy to say that if it kind of easy come, easy go, but it's really a self-reflection purpose. Is like, what is money in all of our lives? You know, is it in control of everything we do? Are we hesitant to give to certain things like church or whatever because we have these goals that we want to accomplish and do in our life, right? And it's just being willing to ask the Lord's will to make His will known. So,
Well, and that really is a hard issue. And that's what we see in here when we look at, you know, and they say some things never change, and here's the people of God that were learning some new lessons. And this was really a revival of sorts in the hearts of the people of Israel at that point. And there was a king, he wasn't perfect, but he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. And that brought revival. When revival comes,
watch out.
the money's not that important for your personal goals anymore. People care more about rebuilding the temple and the glory of God.
God wants your will.
Yeah. So let's close. I'm not sure if we're over or under.
That's 22 past the hour. That's right about there.
Okay. Lord God, we thank you that you have called us to be your people. And you are our God. We praise you and thank you for all that you are and all you do. For your grace, your mercy, and for choosing to dwell us, that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit. And God, I pray that in our bodies, in our hearts, in our minds, in our behaviors, in our values, our goals, that you would be glorified. And we would honor you. And I pray that that more each day together corporately as we gather together to do your will and to glorify you, Lord, that we would be guided and we would grow in Christ likeness. And Lord God, that it would be more evident, your presence would be more evident to even those who see us, who know us, Lord, that they would be drawn and seeing something unique that you are doing here among us. Lord God, I pray that we would surrender everything that is us to you and your purposes. And knowing that you care for us and we need not worry or be anxious about anything because you know you will care for us. Lord, we thank you for this example from your word and this teaching. Lord God, what you taught us to do. Thank you, praise you.
You know, it's interesting